You don't need to shoot much of this, but when he gets to the lectern, you can probably, after you get a little bit of that, you can probably stop if we're going to take an assist. But he's going to be introduced, obviously, and he's going to come up, and then let him start to talk before you cut it off. But you don't need to keep shooting for him. As long as we get him at the lectern and have some footage of that.
You're the watcher we wanted to share with you, and one vision that we wanted to share with DeKalb County, and that is a vision of a fresh start. You see assembled with us some people here from DeKalb County, from the municipality, but also from the State House delegation here in DeKalb County, supporting our friend and the person we think has a fresh start, and that's Vernon Jones. We want to thank you for coming out because we do think that Vernon Jones has the mental capacity. He has the leadership, and he has the fortitude to make a change in DeKalb County. Vernon's being supported by some other legislators that are not present, Representative Henrietta Turnquist, Representative Michelle Henson, Senator Gloria Butler, who's in Columbus speaking. But we wanted to get together to show that he had a broad base of support, not only from the people here in the county, but people that have served with him in the Georgia General Assembly, where he's done a marvelous and miraculous job of working with people, bridging support between the two parties, between people, and he's what we call a consensus and coalition builder. So we're here today to show our support for Vernon Jones for CEO as a fresh start. We're in this old place they call the old courthouse, but we say that Vernon Jones represents a fresh start. What we want to do is to make sure that people understand in DeKalb County that we're at the crossroads in our political life in DeKalb County. It's a time now that we're facing that Atlanta faced in 1972 when they elected a popular mayor by the name of Maynard Jackson. We're here in the year 2000 at our crossroad, in our political crossroad, and we want to let the people know we want to elect, that we support Vernon Jones. But we're going to ask that two of our mayors from two of our cities to say just a few words. The first is going to be our mayor, the honorable mayor from Lithonia, Marcia Glenn. Mayor. Say a few words and then Representative Matters.
Good morning, and I support Vernon Jones to become the next CEO. I think if you listen to Vernon speak in the House of Representatives earlier this year about his support and passion for the passing of the hate crimes legislation, it truly signifies that Vernon understands that diversity means a lot more and goes far deeper than just skin color. Vernon was able to recognize and appreciate a city that I'm the mayor of that had some wrong things in the past. He was able to recognize a fresh new start had been made and that it was transformed and moving forward. Vernon has been very open-minded about his belief in inclusive
he lives in DeKalb County, in my district. He's also out today supporting Representative Vernon Jones, and his quest to become the next CEO on Tuesday. So with that, without any other to do, I'm going to ask that we give our next CEO of DeKalb County for the new year, the new millennium, 2000, Representative Vernon Jones, who will be on Tuesday, the CEO of DeKalb County. I present to you Representative Vernon Jones. Let's give him a hand.
Good morning. Let me say I'm indeed proud and honored to be here among such distinguished elected officials, friends, and supporters. As someone said, that DeKalb County is ready for a fresh start. And I believe, based on my going throughout this county, talking to neighbors, neighborhood associations, civic groups, elected officials, business people, that our message will best represent what DeKalb County wants for the future. That's good, strong leadership, someone who can build a consensus, and someone who has integrity. And I'd like to thank all of those who came out and supported me in the primary, where we got 45% of the vote. To be your next chief executive officer come August the 8th, year 2000. Thank you.
How are you?
Met you at the Atlanta Executive Network the other night.
You sure did.
Our operation is new. Out TV Atlanta is cable operation, and it's also a .com. So we have a good website along with a weekly television program.
Mm-hmm.
And we focus, of course, on the gay community. So we'd like to ask you some questions. We keep getting asked questions about your stand on such things as domestic partnership benefits, for example. Can you give us some view on that for your DeKalb constituents?
Certainly. DeKalb County, of course, we don't have a domestic partnership
Exactly.
benefit plan. I want to look at what they've done in the city of Atlanta, what they've done in Fulton County, Chicago, all around this country. I think it's an important imperative that, first of all, we attract the best and the brightest minds, regardless of race or sexual orientation or gender. I think it's important to offer benefits to everybody, to all of our employees. And certainly, when it comes to domestic partnership, I believe in it, I support it, and there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't do it.
How about equal housing and employment opportunities?
I don't think anybody should be discriminated against, period, based on their sexual orientation. Period. Nobody should be discriminated against, especially housing, job opportunities. I know what it feels like to be discriminated against. The fact of it is, we cannot tolerate that. People pay taxes, they work hard, they have families, and they should be given the same equal rights under the law.
How about gay adoptions? Any view on that?
Well, let me tell you, it's taking place. The fact of it is, if there's a situation where there's a partnership and one happens to have a child, those benefits should be extended to that child as well. I think that's what they're doing up in Chicago. I think that makes sense. I think it's important to extend that benefit to that child, and I have absolutely no problem with that.
Vernon, we appreciate your time, and
Thank you.
good luck on Tuesday.
Thank you all for coming out. I appreciate you too. Thanks a lot.
Let me give you this. This opportunity presented itself, so there we are. It is humid out here. This is Rob Martin at Emory University. I'm with Mark Jordan, who is the Asa Griggs Candler Professor of Religion here at Emory in Arts and Sciences, the college.
That's it.
And you have a new book.
I do.
It's called Silence of Sodom, which is a fascinating title. And I've gotten through it along with your other book. And I think my first question has to do with this silence question, that the Catholic Church has perhaps up to 50% of its priests from local parish to the Vatican perhaps are gay. And if they have this sort of doctrinaire view of homosexuality and what it is, and yet within their own ranks, they don't deal with it very well, do they?
No, and most of what I'm about is trying to explore how that silence is kept. That is, what mechanisms the church uses to keep silence for what really is an open secret. Everyone knows it, certainly every Catholic knows it, and no one says it. How can that situation be maintained? That was the question I started with.
And this was a sequel to your book called The Invention of Sodomy in Christian Theology. Now that book dealt with the Middle Ages principally and the derivation of the term sodomy. And what was your thinking when you wrote the first book?
I wanted to answer a very precise question, which is where did the word and the category sodomy come from? And the answer is they don't come from the Bible. They don't come from the first centuries of Christian experience. They come around the year 1000, which is very late in Christian history. And they come with a very specific purpose. In fact, they were invented in a treatise on the problem of same-sex relations in the priesthood. So the term sodomy was actually first used in theology to describe a problem, what was perceived as a problem by the author, in the priesthood. And that's where I began, and then I just followed its gradual expansion as a category in moral theology up through the end of the Middle Ages, and made the point that the category sodomy doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense in law. It doesn't make any sense in theology.
Right. The new book deals with the fact that the church doesn't speak to it, but when they do, they condemn it. What do you want the church to do? How do they address it?
That's a good question, and I think the bottom line in the book is that you can't get honesty on this issue without major reforms of church power structures, because this issue is so close to the issue of maintaining papal power or the power of the priesthood that you can't change one without changing the other. I don't think it's as simple as getting up in the pulpit and saying nice words about homosexuals. I think to admit the reality of this issue will be to change the power structures in the church fundamentally.
Now, you came to Emory from Notre Dame, which is, of course, a Catholic university. How did you deal with writing these kinds of things there?
I'm very glad to be at Emory. I was out. There were very few out faculty members at Notre Dame. And Notre Dame follows the old Catholic policy, which is don't ask, don't tell. That is, there are a number of gay priests there, a number of gay laymen on the faculty, and they more or less leave you alone if you don't speak publicly about these issues and don't get caught by the police. But as soon as you begin speaking publicly about the issue, things become very unpleasant. And it was pretty clear to me that if I was going to write on these issues, I needed to get out.
Forgive the personal question, but how do you deal with this as a practicing Catholic?
Well, I'm sure the Archbishop of Atlanta would say I'm not a practicing Catholic. I deal with it the way many lesbian and gay Catholics deal with it, which is by holding on to the parts of the tradition that seem to me spiritually true, and by fighting a daily battle against the more poisonous parts of the tradition, the parts that are not only not true, but actually hurtful to people.
Right.
It's a daily struggle, and sometimes very tempting just to get up and walk away from it.
Is there another book in the offing?
Yes, though I think I'm going to rest a little bit after this one, but I am working on the more general question that I raised in Silence of Sodom, which is the question about Jesus' body and the way Christian theology has been very uncomfortable with that.
More specifically, how is that? That is, it's some eroticism in that relationship? Or?
I think there is. I think the Christian tradition has struggled from the very beginning, I mean from the time of the writing of the Gospels, with the question of Jesus' sexuality, and went to great lengths to cut out any possible hint in that direction. We have some early documents that move in that direction, and they were either cut out or condemned as heretical. I think it's been a struggle all along for Christianity. It's a religion of a God who took flesh, and it's very important that he took flesh.
Well, I think every young man looks at Christ on the cross, and particularly since he's mostly undressed, and thinks of some eroticism in that symbolism, does he not?
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the key factors in understanding Catholic liturgy. I mean, you have men dressed in what look to us by modern cultural standards to be women's garments, celebrating a domestic rite, serving a meal. And they're doing it under this figure of a naked man. It's a very homoerotically stressed situation.
I need to read one line from your first book. This is from The Invention of Sodomy. The irrational force of the Christian condemnation of sodomy is the remainder of Christian theology's failure to think through the problem of the erotic. Touch more on that.
One of the things that distinguishes Christian writing from the very beginning is how anti-sexual it is. And it is important to say that the kind of issues we've been talking about in terms of homosexuality are Christian issues with sexuality generally. The original Christian message about sex was don't do it. And only later did Christianity work out relations to marriage, more positive views of sexuality. Certainly in the Catholic tradition, it's only very recently, I mean in the last 30 years, that you've begun to get a more positive teaching about sex even within marriage. So this is not just a problem between Christianity and homosexuality, it's a problem between Christianity and sexuality in general.
As to the priests within Catholicism who really are homophobic, I assume that this is a cover-up and this is the way they cover it up, or what?
In my experience, in many cases, the loudest homophobes in the priesthood are sexually active gay men who are very closeted. And I've received a number of letters since the book was published, just in the last 2 months, from gay priests, some of the letters anonymous, talking about their experiences and talking about their very painful, very isolated existences as highly closeted gay men who are asked in public to speak against homosexuality.
Well, these are the two books, The Invention of Sodomy in Christian Theology, and the latest is The Silence of Sodom, both by Professor Mark Jordan of Emory University. And we thank you, Professor, for your time.
Thanks.
And good luck on the new book.
Yes, indeed, I need it.
This is Rob Martin from Emory University for Out TV Atlanta.